What's up, squad? This is Brandon from the Bantu Sun. Thank you so much for joining me today. So, I've been really interested in a lot of conversation right now around African leadership and what's best for African people. And a lot of this stemmed from the head of Africa, General Michael Langley, discussing the current situation of Africa. And the general is, of course, American of African descent. And he's discussing his his understanding of Africa today. And what came up in the conversation was he touched lightly on regimes that are using natural resources, because the whole conversation, and a lot of people are missing out on this, but the whole conversation was American insecurity about Russia and China within Africa, which is horseradish, right? Because America has been extremely neglectful with Africa for the most part. For the most part, when you talk about Libya, Somalia, the Congo, etc., except for a few countries, South Africa, they had no hesitation with trying to punish South Africa for what was perceived, not what was done, but perceived to be an infringement upon the rights of the white South Africans, of the European descendants within South Africa, which, fair to say, are South Africans. But America has been extremely neglectful of their relationship with Africa. And Africa has been put to a bucket of irrelevancy for the most part. And it's not because Africa is not extremely relevant, it's due to the underdevelopment of Africa and the fact that Africans have been slow on the come up in comparison to their Asian counterparts. So Africa still has so much capacity and potential, but as we say and as we know, capacity and potential is not destiny. Destiny is culture. So Africa is untapped, and of course, Russia and China, in their efforts to try to balance out the West power on this globe, is going to seek access in places where the West aren't strong, and one of those places is in Africa. So the French have, due to their mismanagement and bad relations on the continent, the French, for the most part, have been expunged from numerous amounts of their former colonial territories, primarily in the Sahel, where countries such as Mali, Niger, Burkina Faso said, "Hey guys, we don't want to deal with you guys anymore." And of course, I made a video about this, where I said, "Who's going to replace the French?" People was like, "Well, nobody. Africa's not ready to serve Africa yet." That's the problem. That's the fundamental problem, right? If it was, nobody's talking about who's stepping in to serve Asia, right? Because the Asians are on it. You're gonna have to work very hard to get your foot into an Asian markets. That's not the case with Africa. So the gap, a void, will be filled or will be to a detriment, because that's how development occurs. Development occurs within partnerships. When iron sharpens iron, as you understand and see how things are done, you can refine. This is why the key to development, historically speaking, have not been that God has dropped sweet manna on some people and they have developed beyond others. Is that these are people that are in a highly competitive environment, which is constantly exchanging talent and ideas and technology, and they're able to compete competitively, one up each other over and over again. And this is development. They'll do it a little better. These people will do a little bit better. These people will do it a little better. But the key to development is you gotta be in the game, because you have to have access to the information. Once you have access to the information, you can contribute your value add. So Africa's kicking out the French, but the Africans don't have the strong uh, manufacturing core. They don't have a strong technology core, a strong medical core. So they're still going to need these things. They're not going to want to drop their quality of life. So now it's just a matter of where do they get it from. And obviously, Russia and China feel they're putting themselves in a competitive position to compete. So, nevertheless, the general said this is where they're going. And the person asking the head of African these questions, he goes into, he feigns that he cares about it. He cares nothing for Africa, by the way. Nobody cares for Africa except the Africans. Let's get the let's get the formalities out the way. He does not care. But he talks about, well, are any of these things getting to the people? Africa is well endowed. Are any of these resources getting to the people? And the general response, well, it's a lot of unfortunate situations, basically. And some of the most extreme cases is the situation we're seeing in Burkina Faso with Captain Ibrahim Traore, um, and how he's using pretty much the primary material mainstay of that country at the moment, which is gold, to boost his support and stability of his government to maintain power of his, what he would call the junta, basically a military coup that pretty much dominates the country. And he also talks about Sudan, and I think he kind of conflates, ironically, I thought this was interesting, he conflated the RSF, which is actually the part of the country which are using resources in Darfur and go to West Africa, to this, basically they have this triage between the UAE and Libya. They're trading resources and gaining money. This is what the RSF is doing. And he kind of conflated that a little bit with the government forces, which have basically been combating the RSF. So I thought that was a little bit interesting. But nevertheless, he talks about Ibrahim Traore. And I don't know much about Captain Traore. God bless him and Godspeed. But I have noticed that he gets a lot of online press. And he, outside of looking good in fatigues and a beret, which you can, like, what African don't look good in fatigues and beret? They just look the part. And Captain Traore looks the part. President Traore looks the part. He looks the part of a strong African leader. And he's considered, I believe, at the age of 37 to be the youngest leader on the continent of Africa, which is saying a lot. Obviously, he gained his power through a coup, so much like many other African leaders, unfortunately. And usually when a leader gains power through a coup, they hold on to power for an extremely long amount of time. But this captain is getting a lot of praise, and people are saying, he's this, that, and the other. He gets a lot of favorable praise online for those that embrace this line of thinking, this hyper nationalistic way of thinking through forms of resource nationalization, go it aloneism, for lack of better phrasing. This idea that a country can do everything for itself within itself. It shouldn't trade. It should be isolationist. It should have a single authority rule and led by a gentleman that prefers to wear a pistol on his side, camouflage, and a beret, a outfit for a soldier, as opposed to an outfit for maybe a politician or a man of the people. And that's to one's taste. I have a Western background, so of course I have more taste for a person that comes up dressed and like a civilian, as opposed to a leader that dressed in a military outfit. Because I think, we're not in war. The military outfit, like that, if that's not meant for somebody we're at war with, obviously that's meant for me as a citizen. And this leader, he's getting high praise, but he's just not my cup of tea. And that's what I wanted to talk about. It's like so many people complain on the continent about poor leadership. And I think that's hogwash. It's a video I've been trying to find with Nick. So he talks about the naivete of Africans in a political process. And that's what it is. It all comes down to that. I see that here, and I see that in Africa as well. Like when I look at a Malcolm X, or I look at a Thomas Sankara, or I look at a Patrice Lumumba, all these people were killed by black people, more or less. Like people will say, oh, it was Europeans pulling the strings, but if there was no black hands raised, these people will still be alive. And a lot of in a case, in all of those cases, whether you talk about Malcolm X with the Nation of Islam, President Sankara of Burkina Faso, or President Lumumba, or PM Lumumba of DRC, these people were all presumed, or they were succeeded by the people that were accused of taking them out. whether that was Malcolm X being supposedly taken out by the Nation of Islam, allegedly be taken out by the Nation of Islam, whether that's President Sankara, Thomas Sankara of Burkina Faso being taken out by his number two, Blaise Compaoré, which ruled in Burkina Faso for numerous of years, or whether that's Patrice Lumumba in the Congo, supposedly taken out by Mobutu Sese Seko. So in each one of these cases, and Mobutu ruled for about 30 years in the Congo. And that's what I'm saying. The Nation of Islam is still alive, well, and kicking in America. Blaise Compaoré is still alive, well, and kicking, no longer the leader of Burkina Faso, obviously, with President Traoré in that place. But Blaise Compaoré never faced justice, although he ruled over Burkina Faso for decades, for numerous years. And the same thing for Mobutu. Mobutu ruled over Congo. And what this says to me, right? Because all three of these people have great press, whether it's Malcolm X, Thomas Sankara, Honorable Malcolm X, Honorable Thomas Sankara, and Honorable Patrice Lumumba. All three of these people have great press, right? But their people repudiated them. And they were replaced by someone that their people accepted. For whatever venom their replacements had, it was not to the degree that their antagonists had enough strength and influence to take them out the game. And these leaders live in deep Africa for the case of Mobutu. And Mobutu, and that's what I say. People say, well, Mobutu was a Western puppet. But you can't say Mobutu was a Western puppet and then say Kagame's a Western puppet, because Kagame overthrew Mobutu. So people have to come to terms. But what I'm basically saying is you have to think about this logically. When an African leads, they call it corruption. They don't do anything nobody else do. It takes money. All governments are oligarchs. We constantly harp on that here. All governments are oligarchs. You're going to have to pay people. And we have to not be naive about this. What makes you think people are loyal? Grand speeches. Is it grand speeches? No. These people are subsidizing the oligarchs of their country. They're making sure that they're taking the money from the working stiff. Same thing every country does. Make the money from the working stiff and make sure that it's floating up to the rich oligarchs that keep them in control. This stops the oligarchs from being warlords, right? And it maintains stability in the country. This is why when the West wanted to take Russia out, they targeted the elites. They wasn't trying to destroy Russia. They were trying to destroy the Russian regime because they want to replace the oligarchs in charge. So what that says to me is the Nation of Islam, Blaise Compaoré, Mobutu, these all people that understood the palms that needed to be greased. They understood how society worked. When Thomas Sankara is sitting there and talking about he want to take away all the luxury cars of leadership, yeah, that sounds good to the peasant, but the peasant don't run things. The peasant don't control the army. So you got all these people that worked hard, had family and influential people. They work hard. Do you think they work hard to live like peasants? Do you think they aspire to the highest echelons of their society to live like peasants, to drive a car like everybody else? They like their kickbacks like everybody else in the world. And if those peasants were in the same peasants were in the same position, they would, for lack of a better phrasing, peasants, if they were in the same position, they would want the same thing. And this is why it happened. This is Brutus and Caesar situation here, guys. Like, the oligarchs are going to want their cut because the leadership of a country is just what is settled upon. They say, okay, we can work with this guy, and they get a consensus. Traoré's a captain. This isn't even a general, not even a top tier officer in the army or a colonel. Obviously, there is power backing this gentleman. And whatever his policies is, those policies are being fed to him. He just looks the part. You can say, oh, he's that guy. Maybe in 10, 20, 15 years, maybe when he had time to consolidate more power. But he's being propped up by somebody. Who knows what it is? Who knows if it's internal or external? But he has backing. The Sahel region has very serious problems with ISIS jihadists, people that have no reason to be in the Sahel, pretty much. But this provided the impetus, and French mismanagement provided the impetus, And the civilian ignorance provided the impetus for this junta or this dictatorship to take over and Burkina Faso. And I find that it all comes down to this fundamental point. Leadership sets culture. Leadership sets culture, right? But the culture validates the leadership. When I look at a tough neighborhood where there's incessant crime, or I look at a country that's wayward, the leaders are always of those nations. It is of those nations. If it wasn't, the people would repudiate them, just like they repudiated other leaders. A person like Donald Trump gets elected in America, President Trump gets elected in America because he gives voice to a portion of America that has the same culture. They validate him. They wouldn't, imagine this. Imagine if the powers to be went to Gabon, grabbed an African, and put them in a presidential chair. What do you think will happen? The American public would repudiate him. Same thing happened. These leaders in these African countries, or when I look at an inner city, they're not importing vagrants or delinquents or degenerates into bad neighborhoods in America. The people are giving birth to these people, and they're validating these people, whether directly or indirectly. They're validating these people. The people are able to survive. When you have leaderships like Mobutu, I don't see him as a failure or as a person that extremely corrupt. They say so much, they spend so much dirt on his name, and I don't, like I said, there's no angels and demons in this, but I think it was a person that was able to get buy-in. So when I think about leadership, I think about that. The greatest leaders I know, they represent and validate the culture of the people that put them in that position. So I'd like to know your thoughts. Comment below if you have any insight. Make sure you like, share, subscribe if you enjoy the content. And until next time, take care. Batu up.